So this is our final project for CSE 120. We're group 28 in person, and we made an RPG game with Pygame. It's called Age of Tuna. And so this is the map that everything basically comes back to, and it's full of nodes that contain different events and have different references to text files to control those events. And this one is the start node. I created a text file that was separated into separate lines with a number denoting how many lines that needed to be read. We read that file into the code itself and then just reiterated through every line until we hit the end for the opening screen, and did something very similar for all of the encounters, but we'll get into that when the encounters start coming up.
So a lot of the graphics in this game were made using a mixture of AI and Photoshop. A lot of the photos were based off of what you would see in traditional role-playing games or RPGs, as that's what this game was based off of. The AI was mainly made for more of the sweeping backgrounds, while some of the closer sprites were used a mixture of cat pictures and elements stolen from other pictures on top of them in order to give them their outfits and their unique looks. The same thing was used for different sprites.
And then for the characters, we used a basic cat character class that put the character type. You'd have your base attack, health, and then their current health, and their skill, and their speed, and then there's a subclass for each different character that you can see on the screen now.
And so each of these characters has a different skill that we'll get into later. And here's just the character selection screen, so you get to pick 3. So we're going to pick this one, and this one. And then, as you can see, whenever you get back to the map after completing a node, the node that you just completed turns into a check mark, and it unlocks the nodes next to it.
So again, we read text files in for the encounters, including the combats. They originally had options on how to respond to a combat initiating. We had to simplify that and take that out for the sake of getting a good bug-free code running. But you still run through the lines as you did in the introduction and go into a combat. There's a kind of command at the end of the file that tells you that you're going into a combat. And so we initiate that function within the run game class of our code.
And so here, it just loops through all of the cat characters and then all of the enemy dog characters, and lets you choose between taking an action and using an item. And so if you choose to take an action, you see the current mana of the party and the HP of the cat that's in front, and you can choose to attack or use their skill that has a specific amount of mana usage. And so here we're going to use the skill. And so it says up here what it does, and so it boosts the entire party's attack. But if we try to use an item, we can see that they're blank because we don't have any items yet. But if we try using one anyways, it says, oops, there was no item there.
So when we go into the attacks, the attack was a super easy thing to code in. We went into the character class. In the base class, we added an attack function that would play off of each character's base attack and whatever additions that they had on from items or what have you. And then that was called through each cat as we iterated through them if you chose to attack.
Also, in the character class, we have the basic health that each character starts out with, and then their current health updates when they get damage from the enemies or they use skills that can boost their health. And that updates the current health of the character.
So, we have made them as far as they update one of the attributes from the character class. For example, the sword that we just picked up when used during a fight, as we're going to see very soon, it updates the group's attack and all their skills, because their skills most of the times are based upon using the base attack and adding a ×3 or ×2 multiplication factor to them. The attack is then subtracted from the and that's how they work. Other skills, as far as the medic cat, oh well, now we're going to show you how the sword works.
Yeah. So if we use the sword that we just picked up, instead of saying, oops, there's no item there, because Danny did all the item stuff, it says you used a sword, and just like he was mentioning, it raises the party's attack.
Now, if we were to use a base attack, it's going to do 95 damage instead of 55. If we can see, if we take a look at the heal skill from the medic cat, instead of actually attacking, it's going to heal the party and update every member's current health.
About our combat function as we're in the combat right now. When you choose to attack, part of the attack function itself is to choose a randomized enemy to attack out of a list of enemies that is created at the beginning of each combat. That was chosen as a simpler route, as Danny is currently working on a honestly really awesome initiative-based system. We just had to make sure that we had a good working code for the presentation.
During most of these random encounters that are signified by the question marks on the map, you often get a choice of what to do based on the text that it reads in before. So like in this example, there are some kittens who invite you to play with a ball, and you can choose to leave or you can choose to play with them. And depending on what you choose, like who could resist a ball that jingles, you get different effects on your party, much like the item stuff, very inspired by what Danny did. And it adds attributes or updates your stats, like giving you 100 HP or restoring your mana. Is the shop icon. And so whenever we enter it, we actually enter a shop. And so there are multiple different types of shops that Darren can talk about.
So I created 4 different kinds of shops. Again, we meant to have more shops within the game that would do more, but for the sake of simplifying it and making sure that the code ran well, we had to sort of just randomize them. They were supposed to have an array of items, but again, we had to simplify it. So you just get a random merchant, which will give you a few items that we can use that, again, Danny created very well. You're able to buy items from this shop, including a health potion, mana potion, shield, and sword.
Gives you coins every time you win a battle. And so these coins can be spent here, and every item has a specific amount of coins that it costs, but you buy the items that you want first. So like if I want a sword, then it says I bought a sword. And then maybe I want a health potion, and then if I don't have enough coins, then I don't have enough coins. And then we exit the shop. And now here is the gate to the boss fight.
In this situation, we obviously have not gone and fought the mini boss, which will give us a key to the door. You have to go searching for it.
And one particular note is that node does not get completed if you don't have the key, so you can't just move on.
If you've noticed, a lot of the villages that are cat-based are actually, every single building is made out of cardboard.
And so this is the mini boss node. And I forgot to mention, this map, aside from the start, the gate node, and the final boss node, which is over here, is actually randomly generated. So you can have different maps every time with different random encounters. And so each time you play the game, the experience will be a little bit different. And so here we can see that mini boss. See, even if we're doing absurd amounts of damage, the mini boss is hard enough to take a couple of hits.
You get the notification that you got a key at the end of this combat. When you get to this, we test for the key condition. If it's true, you can unlock the next node, and you'll get a new, slightly more unique text file for this gate.
And as you can see, now that we have the key, the event going on in this node is slightly different, and we can now open the door, which leads us to the final node.
You approach the Doge King, and we gave him a little...
Because every boss fight's got to have a transformation sequence, right?
Of course.
It's admittedly a little long-winded, but what boss monologue isn't?
And there's the transformation.
It's very clearly. I mean, he got a little bit bigger.
Just a little bit.
So the Doge King himself, just like the other enemies, is a unique instance of the enemy class itself. He has way more health and way more damage to make it a little scarier, a little more challenging. You need to use items and special attacks in this to be able to defeat him. But as we can see, we've got a super powered party. He was easily defeated. Now that he's defeated, we go into another text file immediately after that just kind of gives you the rundown on how everything turns out now that you have defeated the Doge King and rescued the Cat Kingdom.
And so if at any point in the game you actually do fail a combat sequence and your whole party dies, the game does in fact give you a death screen and close itself and the program without you having to do anything else. But now that we've won the game, there's a similar ending screen that will show up later that does also close itself. So it says, congratulations on winning the game. And after 10 seconds to make sure that you've seen it, the game itself will close. So I didn't click that, it closed itself. But these are the files that make the game work. So the map is constructed of map nodes that contain like completed, unlocked, the coordinates, and the type of event and the number of event. And it can randomly generate one if requested. The game map constructs a map from those nodes and has a bunch of different functions for updating the unlocked nodes after you complete a node, finding a node based on its coordinates, generating a random node, and converting itself to an array so you can iterate through it. The cat characters, these all have functions for updating their health and mana, the mana's in the party, but updating their health, boosting their health, using a skill, using an attack. And as you can see, there are different subclasses here for different characters that have different skills and do different things. The cat party has the mana and keeps track of the items and the coins for the party for the shop. And so it has functions to update all of those and also check if the party's alive and use items. The enemy sorts and gets the stats for the enemy and the image for the enemy based on the name of the enemy, which is read through the text files. Game text displays text on the screen with or without a border, depending on one of these arguments, and then displays it using the display. And image does the same thing with an image with a certain width and height and a position. And the button is a subclass of image that creates a button that you can click on and has a return value with state and reference. And then run game is the main file that runs the game. And it has an event. So if you have an event with the file name, then it reads the file and goes through and does things like player select or display text or enter combat or player choice, depending on what's in the text file. And then each one has sort of a method within it to perform those things. So like for example, the player select loads all of the images and creates them as buttons. Enter combat, it just as we described, it gets all the enemies from the file, and then make sure that your party isn't dead or that the enemies aren't all dead, and then acts with each character and requests different things. So for example, if there's an item, then you can use it, and if not, it'll return and show the temporary text that there was no item there. Then for player choice, for all the encounters and even within the combat itself, it takes the choice 1, choice 2, displays them as buttons, and gets the decision. And then player give gives an item, enter shop, enters the shop, and displays all the items that you can buy from the shop and removes them whenever they're done. Temp text just displays it text temporarily on the screen. Combat display takes all of the currently alive members of the party and the enemies and displays them on the screen. Pause just holds the game in place for temporary text without letting Pygame shut down or crash, because if you don't handle the events, then it will freeze. And run is the main function of the game, that whenever you run the game, it basically goes through and just checks what the state is, like whether it's the title screen, the map, start, combat, encounter, a shop, a lock node, key node, boss node, and then checks if it's died. So if after the boss, if you died, then it doesn't give you the credits. And then the credits says congratulations on winning the game. And if you died, then your party died. And then just a simple main method that creates the game, runs it, and then quits the game whenever it's done.